Hi, I'm Danielle Hartman, and welcome to Poured in PA, a series sharing the stories of Pennsylvania's craft beer industry. Barrel aging is used for food, spirits, and of course, beer. We talked with a number of brewers to find out why they dump their beers into these wooden barrels.
We were kicking around the idea of doing another barrel-aged beer, but didn't want to do another stout. So we thought it'd be kind of fun to do a brown ale with something that had a little bit of sweetness to it. We thought it'd be fun to put a brown ale in a rum barrel, and we put dates, raisins, and brown sugar into this beer. So it's an exciting base beer that will taste good in the tap room whenever it comes out fresh, but could really develop in a barrel like a rum barrel. So the barrel we selected is from Hidden Still. It was a bourbon barrel that they aged David E. bourbon in and then filled with their rum and aged in there for over a year. So it's going to have multiple components to it, of not only the bourbon that rests in there first, but also the rum. It's going to pull, we're hoping, some of the oak, the vanilla to play off of the residual sweetness that we're getting. I'm not looking for anything too crazy. I'm not looking for anything far from the beer that went into it. I just want to kind of let the beer and the barrel shine.
Barrel aging is a lot of fun. I learned it from the wine world originally before I came into beer making. It allows us to play with and utilize some other industry tools, such as wine and distilleries, who like to age their products in order to impart different flavors. We have a lot of different types of oak out there. There are some other types of wood that are used in barrel aging as well.
For us, with sours and saisons, barrel aging it provides maturity and complexity. There are living organisms in the beer that continue to live for years in the barrel, and during that time, new flavors emerge, as well as pulling out characters from the wood like vanilla and just a general neutral woodiness that works well in blending classic sour beers.
The reason why I want to put a beer in a barrel is to extract some of that spirit that they've taken the time to craft, put in there, to extract those notes of vanilla or butterscotch or tobacco. From our perspective, it just, I think, elevates as a brewer what we're trying flavor-wise to accomplish in a particular beer style. I know distillers are going to have probably a completely different answer why we still use the American oak, aside from the laws behind what it takes to actually classify something as bourbon.
Bourbon is one of the very few whiskeys in the world that require a brand new, unused American oak container. Within the first year, it actually takes on 60% of its flavor and 60% of its color within that time frame. You have your char and your toast level, and over time, that whiskey will penetrate the wood and start to absorb some of those caramelized wood sugars in that toast layer and add flavor and color to your whiskey. And it'll also touch that char level, which acts as a natural carbon filter and removes some of the harsher notes within the whiskey. For anybody that's ever had whiskey right off the still, it's eye-opening, to say the least. Now, the rest of the time, the number of years from there, you have a lot of different chemical reactions, oxygenation and esterification, that really sets bourbon apart from when it's good to make it great.
The goal is not to be strictly one style and one particular type of barrel, because there's a lot of interesting beer styles out there that can utilize everything from the bourbon barrels that we've done so far to the rum barrel that we filled today to future plans for wine, gin barrels, to really showcase the intricacies of what different barrels can do.
Well, the kind of thing we typically age in barrels can range from more typical things like, big robust stouts or our barley wine. But sometimes we find that we've got a barrel with some subtlety and nuance in it that would be overwhelmed by an imperial stout or, a 9% Scotch ale or something like that. aging a cream ale in a gin barrel, or we actually have done our Hefeweizen in gin barrels a couple of times, and that's been really interesting. I refer to it as a drink because it kind of comes across as a cocktail. The gin notes are there, and the herbal notes are there to complement the beer versus stomp all over it.
We get to make certain things like barrel-aged stouts or heavy porters, or maybe imperial red ale and imperial blonde ale aged in gin barrels. So we've played with a lot of different things, but then also we can do wild fermentation, so bring out the sours, Brettanomyces, Pediococcus, Lactobacillus, things like that. Those barrels generally tend to be a little more neutral, maybe, and not imparting so much flavor, but we do need that vessel in order to contain that wild fermentation as well.
We are typically looking for French oak. It limits the ingress of oxygen. It slows it down over time compared to like a lot of American-made barrels that were more designed for whiskey maturation. French oak barrels that were designed for the wine industry provide a nice, even environment that you can age sours and saisons for years in, up to years in, and continue to develop nice characteristics.
Once we're done with the barrel, quite a bit of that oak component and those wood sugars is pretty much removed. I mean, we go into a barrel above 50% alcohol, and alcohol at its core is really a solvent, so it really strips a lot of what's in the lumber out of there by the time it makes it to a brewery, but that lumber is really wet with whiskey. So that beer is gonna absorb those whiskey notes, and I think it also goes through a little bit of an oxygenation component as well.
These are barrels made of wood, so they're not 100% sealed. They are porous. Oxidation is a concern. That's why we're going to keep an eye on this beer being of lower ABV. The risk of oxidation is going to be a little bit higher than some of our, for example, our 12% Imperial Stout. I'm not as concerned about that.
The longer it's in the barrel, the more risk you have of something going wrong, the bigger the risk of oxidation or spoilage. There's definitely a failure rate associated with putting beer into barrels, so you got to be willing to make the hard decisions and say goodbye to some beer now and then.
There is always a small risk of infection whenever you're using some of these barrels. When you're choosing some of these high proof spirits, that definitely helps out. If we do go into aging in wine barrels, the risk becomes a little bit higher because those microbes have a better chance of survival than when you're dealing with 100+ proof spirit like we were today. But we take every step we possibly can along the way to make sure we're not opening ourselves up to infection in any way we can possibly prevent. Coming into this as being predominantly a 5-gallon home brewer, finding quality barrels or finding enough people that wanted to come together and collaborate on a beer to put into a full-size 53-gallon or even finding a 25-gallon barrel never really came into fruition, but having the opportunity to do that with the beers that we're producing early on here gives another level of creativity.
We're still pretty small with our barrel aging projects. We always have a few going. We've really been working with local distilleries, so we're able to get those barrels super fresh. There's a lot of great Pennsylvania bourbon that's being produced right now. So having that in our backyard and working directly with the distillers has been pretty cool.
We've had a lot of breweries reach out to us for barrels to age their beer and so forth, and it's very exciting because I personally love barrel-aged beers. Everybody in the craft community kind of likes using local purveyors instead of just going to barrel brokers. So to say that, you used your neighbor's barrel is it's more appealing to, us and them.
Hidden Still partnership's been fantastic. Sourcing 2 barrels now, utilizing their spirits in our tap room for some of our cocktails. We couldn't be more happy with how that partnership has gone. It's really a top of the class in business from our standpoint that we're seeing so far.
Here at Hidden Still, we have a restaurant with a full bar, I believe 12 tap systems inside and 300 seats with a outdoor patio with a fully functional outdoor bar as well. We started up in August 2015. We operated in Lebanon, Pennsylvania until September of 2020 before we moved up here to Hershey, and we've been in Hershey ever since. We primarily make bourbon whiskey, where we make that roughly 90 to 95% of the time, but we also have quite a large book with some other offerings, whether it's rye whiskey, gin, vodka. We have 3 expressions of rum and other items like that.
For us, we're fortunate enough to be in this region because a lot of our interests take place in the state forest. The forest is named after Andre Michaux, who's a French botanist who helped identify the plants of this particular region of South Central PA. We were really big on staying in Waynesboro because that's where we're both from, where we came back to after college, where we had started our family. The name Michaux Brewing Company that we were going for with our interest in the Michaux State Forest, the bones of the building were perfect for the tap room that we wanted to put in. We wanted a tap room that would allow us to be family friendly, have some outdoor space. Our original business plan evolved to not just being a brewery and tap room to a brewery tap room with a food menu as well. Waynesboro already had 2 breweries that established themselves, and we wanted to kind of set ourselves apart to give something else to the Waynesboro brewery community.
Make sure to follow Michaux Brewing to see when their barrel-aged beers will be ready. Thanks for joining us. That's all the time we have. Until next time. Cheers.